Namaskar to all of you. Jai Gurudev, Jai Ma. So, this is a series that we have been doing on a book written by Sri Aurobindo called Synthesis of Yoga. And this talk is in continuation of a chapter called Four Aids in this book. So, in this chapter, we have been talking about what are the key methods or helps or aids that we have on our journey towards the supreme infinite reality. It's a long spiritual journey and its expression in our day-to-day life in form of integral yoga. So what are the key aids on that way for us? Last time we gave an analogy of in our life, if we take up any form of travel, let's say a travel to a hilltop or a trek. So we are always going uphill. So it consumes a lot of energy. So we would not like to carry a lot of stuff with us. We would like to carry only that is very, very important, what is a priority for us. We would like to travel light. So same way on this inward spiritual journey also, if we have to travel light, it is important to be aware of what are those essential elements which help us on the way. And that is what Sri Aurobindo describes through this chapter called Four Aids. And those four aids are Shastra. The second one is Utsah, or our personal effort. The third one is the Guru or the teacher. And the fourth is time or Kala. So just to give you a brief on the first two of these aids, Shastra, Sri Aurobindo describes as the supreme Shastra, or the eternal scripture or the eternal Veda, is not something outside, but it is located within in the depths of our hearts. And it is folded up like a lotus or a bud, and it gradually unfolds. And in that process of unfolding, there is a learning which emerges out of us, which is mirrored outside in various life experiences of challenges, difficulties, and learnings emerging out of them. So the Supreme Shastra is located within the depths of our hearts. But that doesn't mean the books outside are not important. The various Vedas and the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita and all the literature that has been written on spirituality represents the experience, past experience of the great yogis and masters. And it is important to draw inspiration from that, but it is also important not to get limited by what is written in the past literature. And Sri Aurobindo asks us to make a choice whether we want to be the pilgrims who are taking up a set road or a set path towards a familiar destination which has been well charted out, or do we want to be the pathfinders in the ever-evolving forest of life? The life is ever-evolving. It's not the same as it was 1,000 years back. So the forest of life is ever-evolving. And do we have the courage to be the pathfinders on this ever-evolving forest? And for that, we need the unique supreme Shastra which is located within, and we draw inspiration from outside in form of any other previous book. So that's a brief summary on what Sri Aurobindo means by the first aid, that is the Shastra. And when we have the Supreme Shastra or the book, it calls for a sincere student, a student who is ready to put in a lot of personal effort or a joyful personal effort, and that is the Utsah that Sri Aurobindo talks about. Why is a strong personal effort important? It is quite obvious, because if the book is deep within, we also need to acknowledge that outside there are all these attractions and influences and insecurities, so many things which are waiting to catch our attention. And even if we think or wish to look within, we meet a storm of restlessness within us. It's common to hear from people that the moment I sit to meditate, I become even more restless. So we meet that storm within us the moment we look inwards. So it calls for an intense aspiration within us, an intense seeking of the divine within that can pierce through the storm. It calls for an intense concentration which will pierce through every challenge of life and get to the essence of the subject. And it calls for an intense determination and persistence, that we can not be satisfied just with fleeting glimpses of the divine, but bring it out more and more, open it up more and more in day-to-day life. And as this effort grows and the connection grows with this inner divine, or that inner space of abundance, that inner space of unconditional love, it starts to feed our personal effort, and it becomes into a beautiful cycle which starts to spiral and expand, and it expands beyond us and reaches a point where our personal effort becomes effortless. And that is the time more and more surrender and submission comes into our sadhana. So this is about the second aid. And again, it is a beautiful sequence. Once you have the Supreme Shastra and you have a sincere and determined student, the third key element is, of course, a teacher or a guru. Because the journey is long, and it is quite possible that the student might lose his way, get distracted, be influenced. So it is really the strong presence, love, wisdom and power of a true teacher which guides the student back again on the path. The guru is the ideal in front of us. The more and more a sadhak contemplates upon the guru, the more and more it serves the guru, the more it allows its lower being to transform into the higher nature. But again, the question in front of us is, where is our guru? Who is my guru? Where will I find my guru? When will I find my guru? And all of us who are gathered here, I'm sure, have this question, or an intense burning question: where is my guru? This question always reminds me of a personal experience. I think the year was 2018, and one of my teachers, he is also known as the father of holistic medicine in South Africa, a very evolved soul. He's now 80 years old and must have been around 76 at that time. An evolved soul because he has helped numerous patients, thousands and lakhs of people, influenced lakhs of lives, and also influenced the lives of hundreds and thousands of doctors by helping them understand that disease, the solution to any disease is not outwards, but one has to find the answer inwards. So truly an evolved soul, a guide to many people, and he was invited to India to give a talk on holistic medicine. And more than the talk, he was excited to come to India because he wanted to find his guru. So even at that stage, that question burns in our hearts, that when will I have that living touch with the guru? And he booked himself for 15 days in the Himalayas, hoping to find him there. And what happened was that he found himself in Himalayas 13 out of those 15 days lying in a bed, sick, and not even able to move. None of his holistic medicines could do anything at that point. And all through his talk in Delhi, one of the key things that he had to say is that antibiotics are bad, one should not consume them, they are harmful to health. And eventually on the 13th day, he was humbled to feeling that now he does need an antibiotic. So there are various meanings, and why this transpired in the life of a great man can have various different interpretations. Maybe one of the learning was to be in the moderation and not take any extreme stance. But there is much more to it, and we will have some answers to it through the course of this talk. But definitely our journey towards finding the guru is not a fairy tale. It is full of its twists and turns. So the question still remains, who is my guru? Where will I find him? When will I find him? And to answer this question, the first step is to understand the ultimate purpose of a guru. And Sri Aurobindo writes that the ultimate purpose of having a guru is to find the universal guru or the Jagat Guru within. So it is again that divine which he calls upon as the Jagat Guru or the universal guru, which can be described as that space of abundance or unconditional love, power, bliss within us. And it is not just about finding that inner space, it is also about being able to stay open to it and to be able to trust oneself in the hands of that divine within, submit our whole being for the transformation to happen. So that is the ultimate purpose of a guru, which goes from the beginning of the sadhana. In the beginning of the sadhana, a sadhak his senses are clogged, his experience is largely turned outwards. There are desires, there are expectations, there are insecurities in the outer being. And hence, with that restlessness, it is even a challenge initially to perceive the divine within. So in the initial phase, the guidance is required for the necessary purification and the necessary peace to be established in the being, so that one can start getting the glimpses of the divine or perceive that space within. But that is only the first step, because then again there are these urgent things in our life which become so important that they again suck us out of this experience. And it becomes even more important because this universal guru within is not teaching us through a book. It is actually teaching us through errors, imperfections, and suffering. Sri Aurobindo writes that the universal guru within takes us to the truth through the errors, takes us to perfection through the imperfections, and takes us to bliss through the suffering. So when these things are part of our life, there is suffering, there is errors, there is imperfections, that seeds in a self-doubt. Even though one has had the glimpses of the divine, it again seeds the doubt in the consciousness of a sadhak. And sometimes in this self-doubt and impatience, a sadhak may also start seeking miracles. And then one gets attracted to the miracle gurus who pose as if they know the truth, but they further block the ascent of the soul. So in those moments of self-doubt arises the need of the faith and the courage and the surrender. And the ego finds it hard to perceive. A human system finds it difficult to perceive in those moments and have faith in something unseen within, and hence needs an external object of faith, an external object of guidance which can help it to see the unseen within. And that is where the second part of the Guru's guidance comes in. First, to help the sadhak perceive the divine, and then to act like an external object of faith, act like an external object of guidance, to repeatedly, even in the most challenging moments, help the student see deep within. So this is the ultimate purpose of having a guru. But again, what form does this guru take for us is the next question. So it doesn't matter what, it is not one form or name that the guru will take for all of us. It may vary from individual to individual depending on the conditioning of the sadhak through this life and the past lives. Some may find it easier to open up to a transcendent divine name and form, for example, Krishna or Mahakali or Shiva. Whatever name or form they may choose, it is important that it is in harmony to their nature, so that they can open up to that form. And some may find it challenging to open up to an abstract figure with multiple arms, and they may choose to look upon or open up to an avatar from the history of the mankind, whether it is Gautam Buddha, Lord Krishna as an incarnation, or Jesus Christ. And then some may not even believe in incarnations of avatars and may choose to believe in and have faith in the masters and the prophets, the great teachers that have existed. And we have had many of them in the 19th and the 20th century. Ramakrishna Paramahansa Ji, Sri Aurobindo, Swami Vivekananda, Mother. Sri Paramhans Yogananda ji, and many more. So some may find it easier to open up to these masters or prophets who have left with them great words of wisdom. But then again, there are many of us who would still look for a living divine influence in their life. But at this point again, Sri Aurobindo comes in and tells us that it is not so important that what name or form does the Guru take. What is essential is our attitude towards the Guru. It is important to find the appropriate name and form to which we can open up to, but what is essential is the attitude. And he underlines 3 key elements to that attitude. The first is to avoid any form of egoism or sectarianism. This is my Guru is the ultimate, which leads to attachments and sectarianism, and then a sadhak may get lost in comparisons and conflicts with various different sects and forget the true purpose of having a guru, the ultimate purpose of having the teacher in their life. So avoiding any form of sectarianism or ego. The second is to be able to see one's own guru in all the great masters that have ever existed. If I love Krishna, then I see Krishna in Jesus Christ. I see Krishna in Buddha. I see Krishna in Sri Aurobindo. I see him in Mother. And why is this important is because even though we have chosen to open up to one of the names and forms of divine as the Guru, but the actual Guru Tattva is infinite. And it has infinite forms and has a wide message for us. And all of these great masters have come in the history of mankind with a specific message for the mankind. For example, Lord Krishna came with the message of Karam Yoga. If one has to fight, one fights, but fights for the sake of the divine. Jesus Christ was a figure of humility and sacrifice in the name of divine. Gautam Buddha, the message was to be in the present moment. Ramakrishna Paramhansa ji, the message was that all roads lead to one. All religions lead to one common central realization. Sri Aurobindo talks about the integrality of the realization. It would be unfair to limit each of these infinite masters to one message, but it is important to draw the essence of their life on earth, draw the message, see one's own Guru in each of them, and integrate that into our own consciousness. So that is the second aspect of what Sri Aurobindo talks about as an ideal or the best possible attitude towards a Guru. And the third is to always have one's sight on the ultimate purpose of the Guru, which we talked about, is to open up to the universal teacher, universal guide within us. And he writes these beautiful lines that nothing has been finally accomplished if that has not been accomplished. So if we have not opened up to the universal Guru, nothing has been accomplished. It is not sufficient to worship Krishna, Christ, or Buddha without, if there is not the revealing and the formation of the Buddha, the Christ, or the Krishna in ourselves. So as we submit more and more to the Guru, gradually our lower nature transforms, and there is the transformation of the being leading to development of the Krishna or the Buddha or the opening to the Christ within us. And all other aids equally have no other purpose. Each is a bridge between man's uncovered state and the revelation of the divine within him. So whether it is the Supreme Shastra, whether it is our personal effort, whether it is a book, one has to have one's sight on the ultimate purpose of having any of these aids. So having talked about the purpose of having a guru, what are the various forms that a guru can take depending on the conditioning of an individual, an ideal or best possible attitude towards a guru, the next question in front of us is, what are the methods of a guru? How does he teach? How does he transform the student? And here Sri Aurobindo talks about three things. One is teaching, second is example, and third is influence. It is sometimes amusing the number of times three comes up in Sri Aurobindo's works, and we have already done a talk on Trinity. But how does a guru work through us? Does he see us as an empty vessel on which a lot of information has to be unloaded? Is the teacher a disciplinarian who takes the student through a rigor? The outer ways are actually infinite. The guru may go through a lot of different ways, but broadly it is teaching, example, and influence. And what does teaching mean? Does it mean a teacher in a classroom imposing one's knowledge and thoughts upon a receptive, passive student? Maybe not. In this case, it is more of a seeding of the consciousness of a student, of a sadhak. A simple analogy would be an analogy of a diya. If we see a guru and a disciple as a diya, a guru can go on describing a flame to the disciple diya, that a flame is yellow in color, it is warm, it is blue in the center. It can go on giving endless descriptions of the flame, but that doesn't do too much good to the sadhak. What it needs is that seed or that spark which will light up the flame in the diya. So it is actually the seeding of the consciousness of a sadhak. To give another practical example, a spiritual teacher can go on talking about that how you are not this body, you are this soul, you are not this mind, you are something beyond, you are not this emotions. But it is about seeding the consciousness of the student with the right question. The question asked by Ramana Maharishi, who am I? And in answering that question, who am I, is where it naturally leads a sincere sadhak towards a realization of the self, that he is much more than this body. And then teaching is also not an instruction and giving the student an imperative formula or a fixed method, but it is giving gentle guidelines and giving methods as an aid on the journey of yoga, with a warning of not getting limited by it. For example, we have lots of gurus who share methods as ultimate form of yoga, that this is the ultimate form of yoga and you need to practice it this many times a day in this exact pattern, and if you do that, then you will reach the divine, and you must do it in this exact format. So that is a bit like giving an imperative formula, a rigid method. Whereas a true guru gives it out as, here is a process, here is a method which will aid you in the process or in the journey of yoga. Practice it to the best of your ability and capacity. Do your best, but beware of attachments and do not limit yourself by this method. There will be a day you will outgrow this process and it has to be left behind. So that is how a true teacher instructs or teaches. The second is being an example for the sadhak. And here, being an example is not in terms of how the guru leads his lives outwardly. Taking the analogy of the diya, it is not important how, it is not essential how beautiful the diya is outside, how many colors are there, does it have artwork on it. What matters is the central flame in the diya. Does the guru lead his life with that element of central realization? And does that central realization govern his whole life? And that is what truly inspires a sadhak. And that is what the prakash or the light of that flame is, what warms and lightens the life of the disciple diya. And even in actions of service by the guru, it is not so much the outward act of service that the guru is performing in his life, but the central element of compassion, which is more integral to being an example. There are lots of people who are doing service, but it is that light of compassion which inspires the sadhak. So this is the second method, which is example. And the third method of a guru is influence. And again, this influence is not an influence of an authoritarian teacher who disciplines the students. But Sri Aurobindo describes a guru through these beautiful words, that guru is a presence from where there is a central outpouring of the consciousness, and it's love, bliss, joy, power, peace. These are beautiful words. Guru is a presence. Sri Aurobindo always brings in the integrality between the passive and the active, the central divine principle and the dynamic principle. So he defines guru as a presence which is a passive awareness and which is a source of central outpouring of the dynamic consciousness, which brings with it its love, its power, its bliss and joy. So guru is that powerhouse, when we come in presence of a true master, it immediately charges up all that are in the presence of that guru. And above all, a guru is not so interested in the title of a guru, because he sees himself as an instrument of the divine. And here also Sri Aurobindo says, he's a man helping his brothers, a child leading children, a light kindling other lights, an awakened soul awakening souls. And that is the feature of being soulful. The ego always looks for inequality, one above the other, whereas a truly realized man sees oneness and equality. So he sees himself as a child leading children. He sees himself as awakened, awakening others. So he sees that oneness and equality as a teacher. And when a sadhak gets anchored and tethered to the feet of the Guru, has opened himself to the supreme Shastra, and has a determined and intense effort in place, Sri Aurobindo says he is sure to reach his goal. And after that, every fall is a means for the rising. And birth and death just become processes on the way of development of the being. And then it is just a matter of time or kal, which is the fourth aid that Sri Aurobindo talks about. So there has been a lot that has been written on time or kal. It's again one of the common questions, just like finding the guru and understanding of what really time means. What is time? And even more often, we all perceive in our life that how our perception of time changes depending on different situations. In a situation where we are joyful and happy, we see time flowing by. And in moments of pain, sometimes time seems to be contracted and every moment is painful. So our perception of time also changes, and what is it that creates the difference in perception of time is another question. And it truly needs a master with a very wide and a universal view to be able to come up with a definition. Personally also, I have felt this need to understand what really time means, and how beautifully this definition that Sri Aurobindo gives satiates that question in us. And he says, time is a field of circumstances and forces meeting and working out a resultant progression whose course it measures. Time is a field of circumstances and forces. So let's understand this with an example. We are here in a circumstance. We are all gathered. Every moment is a circumstance. So time is a field of circumstance and forces meeting. So in this very moment, we have lots of forces that are acting upon us. Right from very basic physical forces, the gravitational force, the magnetic forces around us, the electromagnetic forces around us, and then the biomagnetic forces around us. The biomagnetic forces being the forces of our emotions. And here around in this room, there are all the emotions of love, joy, acceptance, to emotions of restlessness, every possible emotion. each of this is also contributing as a force to the circumstance here that we find ourselves in. And then there are subtle forces which are beyond, which we cannot see or don't have the perception for, but they do exist. They are also pouring their effects in our current field of circumstances. So time is a field of circumstance and forces meeting and working out a resultant progression whose course it measures. So they are working themselves out together. And he writes, to the ego, it is a tyrant or a resistance to the divine and instrument. So again, to go through a very simple experience, if we imagine that we have 1 hour and we have to do a lot of work, and that work is for our personal gain, then very often we have an experience of contraction. We would feel a lack of time, as if the time is slipping out of our hands. And we are looking for time. And if we put on the other side, if we have 1 hour again, but we visualize ourselves serving others in any form, and immediately there is a shift from a very contracted experience within the same limitation of 1 hour. During that service, we are more in touch with that abundance, and we feel expanded, and we feel more of flowing with that time. So from an experience of seeing time as a resistance, we feel more time as a medium flowing with it. And that happens because the divine will is the will of compassion. And when our personal will combines more and more with that divine will, the experience of time, the experience of these circumstances and forces meeting together transforms into more of a flow or a medium. And then if for a moment we leave our human frame and go beyond this universe towards the source of every action and every movement, from that space, whatever is willed for is bound to happen. And in that space is where the time becomes an instrument or a servant. And these are the great masters with that capacity for being identified with the transcendent, not just in a meditation, but also in the here and now. And they create that instantaneous transformation. For them, the time is an instrument. So from being identified with the ego and seeing time as resistance, to engaging more and more in actions of compassion and seeing time as a medium, to being completely identified with the source and seeing time as an instrument. So that is one aspect through which we can define time and understand what one needs on the spiritual journey in order to have time as a friend and as an instrument and not as a resistance. The second key aspect Sri Aurobindo talks about is the attitude towards time. And he calls out for an attitude of patience, an endless patience. This reminds me of a line by Mother, those who know how to wait always have time by their side. And it is a sense of allowing things to happen and waiting for the things to happen. And again, we can understand and feel it through an experience. if we make a statement that I want to be enlightened in 1 year's time and I'll do anything for that. Again, it is something which is driven by impatience and ego and desire, restlessness, and it naturally will bring in insecurities within us. And on the other hand, if we make the statement that I am ready to wait endlessly for the divine, I, thy seeker, I love you and I'll wait for you endlessly through births and deaths, it immediately expands us. And takes us out of the mold of ego. So he calls out for an endless patience. To understand with another example, if we see our aspiration like a seed growing into a plant of awakening that needs to be watered every day. But it is not like if we water it more, it will grow any faster. It will grow at its own steady pace. In fact, adding too much water may impede the progress of the growth of the plant. Hence, the need for an endless patience. But here again, Sri Aurobindo comes in and says, this is only one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is to have a strong, intense will and energy towards self-realization. So one can look at it in quantum physics, and both in chakra philosophy, they have talked about two movements of the time, one being the horizontal movement of time. There we need a sense of patience, letting things come to us. And then there is a vertical movement of time, moving from the source consciousness down below into the here and now. And in this vertical movement of time, it calls for that strong, intense will, that progressive increase in the capacity, increase in the energy and mastery as we go along towards self-realization. And that eventually culminates what Sri Aurobindo calls, it reaches eventually the miraculous instantaneousness of the supreme divine transformation. So the ideal attitude of the sadhak towards time is to have an endless patience, as if he had all eternity for his fulfillment, and yet to develop the energy that shall realize now with an ever-increasing mastery and pressure of rapidity till it reaches the miraculous instantaneousness of the supreme divine transformation. So to summarize and share the key insights and actionables from today's talk, it is good to reflect on what is that divine form or name we love the most and we find it easiest to open up to. And then become closer and closer to that form. Open up more and more, submit more and more of our being to that outer form and name. And being vigilant of any attachments to that form, and having our sights on the ultimate purpose, which is to open up to the divine within, leading to an opening outside and opening inside, and the divine transformation. The second is whenever we find ourselves on the spiritual journey or in our daily life impatient and struggling with time, to become aware in those moments, what identity am I taking? Am I taking an identity with this physical form or an identity with the divine? What is the purpose of the action? Is it for the personal gain entirely, or it is out of compassion and service? And then to choose the best possible identity and the best possible purpose or intent in our action that will eventually give us an ease in the time. And third is to find the balance between waiting and patience and having an intense will. I will end with one of the Guru shlokas. Akhanda mandalakaram vyaptam yena characharam tatpadam darshitam yena tasmai Shri Guruve namaha. Ajnanam timiram dhushya jnananjanam shalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Guruve namaha. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurur Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Guruve namaha. Tasmai Shri Guruve namaha. Thank you. Dr. Bijlani, if you would like to add something.
I can start with where Mankul ended. Guru Vandana. Dhyanamoolam Guror Murti Pujamoolam Guru Padam Mantramoolam Guror Vakyam Mokshamoolam Guru Kripa. The four aids on the path of yoga have been beautifully given to us in these two sessions by Dr. Mankul Goyal. The first aid, Shastra, that is knowledge available to us in books. This knowledge is of two types. One is the deeper truths of existence, which are not normally accessible to the ordinary mental consciousness. And these truths we find in scriptures like the Upanishads and the Gita, the experiences of the rishis and mystics, which have been put in words. There is another type of books available which talk about the processes and methods. That is, the processes and the methods by which these rishis and mystics could get that realization. And in that category are the textbooks of yoga, such as the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Hatha Yoga Pratipika, Gheranda Samhita, and so on. There is an overlap because to some extent those scriptures which give us just the knowledge may give also a hint of the methods, and those which give us the methods also invariably give us quite a bit of the knowledge that one may expect to gain through the use of those methods. The second was the Utsah, that is the personal effort of the seeker. And this personal effort is only personal to the extent that our ignorant mind makes it look like. And in fact, it is the divine that is working through us. But then Sri Aurobindo also wants that just this mental belief that it's not me who is working, it's the divine working through me, should not be translated too hurriedly, too prematurely into practice. Because if we start translating it into practice prematurely before we are fully ready for that type of a shift, of not seeing it as personal effort, we may lapse into inertia. We may feel that I need not do anything, the divine will do everything through me, which means that we stop doing what we should be doing. So this should not be a premature shift. When it will happen, we'll automatically know for ourselves that, well, now I truly know that it is the divine working through me, and therefore we have to wait for that to become a realization, that is something becoming real to us, rather than stay at the level of a mental belief. Then the third, the Guru. And perhaps one of the most important questions in society today is, who is a true Guru, a genuine Guru? Because there are so many spiritual teachers and leaders who are being seen as Gurus. They want to be seen as Gurus, and people are not very sure whether it is a genuine Guru. In fact, it's very difficult to say who is a genuine Guru, and also it may not be completely necessary. Why it is difficult is because one cannot judge someone who is at a much higher level than us. So we being at a level, seeking someone who is at a much higher level makes it impossible for us to actually judge that person. And secondly, why it may not be absolutely necessary is that the message is more important than the messenger. So what he's telling us is more important than what he himself is like. But having said that, there are some guidelines which are available. Firstly, a genuine Guru should make us feel at peace. The presence of the Guru, as Dr. Mankul Goyal said, we should feel completely at peace. We should feel the Guru's light, force and love, and that should give us both sort of the confidence that now I have a perfect guide available. I have the Guru's force available to me as a protection, as something that will strengthen my will and aspiration, and I have the Guru's love available to me, which will give me a sense of security, a sense of comfort, a sense of joy. So that is the type of presence that the Guru should make us feel. Secondly, the Guru should not be the one who is trying to collect more and more disciples. The disciples may flock to him, but he is making no personal efforts to try and collect disciples. And this reminds me of a story which many of you might have read in the autobiography of a yogi by Swami Yogananda Paramahansa, where he gives the story of a young boy who as a child was once drowning, and then he saw the figure of an Indian looking person in the robes of a Swamiji, who came and lifted him up and protected him, and he was saved from drowning. So this image stayed in his mind, and then several years later, when he was about 17, 18 year old, Swami Vivekananda visited Chicago and the US. I'm not sure whether it happened in Chicago or some other city of the US, but then this boy was with his mother and he saw Swami Vivekananda in a street, and he told his mother at once, he is the man who had saved me from drowning. So they followed him, and then this boy pleaded with Swami Vivekananda that you saved me from drowning, please make me your disciple, I want you to be my Guru. What did Swami Vivekananda say? He was not happy to get one more disciple. What he told him was that your Guru will come later, and this Guru will give you a silver cup. Now, this boy grew up another 25, 30 years, went through all the experiences of life which were probably important for him to be really receptive to a genuine Guru. And when he was at that stage, then he happened to listen to a talk by Swami Yogananda Paramahansa. And then he was suddenly reminded that, yes, I think this is the Guru Swami Vivekananda had told me, I found my Guru. So then he went and pleaded with Swami Yogananda Paramahansa, I want to be your disciple, and he accepted him as a disciple. So he became his Guru. But how about the silver cup? Now this person thought that the silver cup was only a figurative, something symbolic, because the silver is something precious. So the Guru gives me something very precious. So it was just sort of to say the precious gift that I am getting from the Guru. So it was for that he has used the word silver cup. But then wait a while. After another few years, sometime in the 1930s, Swami Yogananda Paramahansa made a trip to India, and while going back, he was going back around Christmas time, he made sure that he will buy gifts for all his disciples in the US. And then he started distributing those gifts when he reached back. And can you imagine, the gift that this person ended up getting was a silver cup. So this is a very interesting story which shows that when the right guru comes, one knows, and the guru is not really trying to collect disciples. And another important thing related to this is, not only does not try to collect, once you adopt the guru does not try to hold you. He does not try to bind you. He is in fact eager that you should be able to find that inner guide so that you can be weaned off from the physical form of the guru. So these are some of the things that tell us what a genuine guru is. But then does the guru himself have to have a perfect realization? Does he always have to be a rishi? Now this is a question which was put by Dilip Kumar Roy to Sri Aurobindo once. Dilip Kumar Roy was one of the most intellectually developed disciples of Sri Aurobindo. So once he asked him very politely, in your case it is different, of course you are a Maharshi, but everybody does not get a guru who is at that level as at your level. Does it really matter that the guru should be at the peak spiritual realization? Sri Aurobindo said, no, it's not necessary. He should be sincere, he should be a genuine guru, but his spiritual realization, the level of his spiritual realization is not important, because it is not the guru's force which is working on the disciple. Irrespective of the guru, it is actually the force of the divine working through the disciple. So the guru is like a channel. He is a channel for the divine force to act. And something similar the Gita has also said, where Sri Krishna tells Arjun that whenever I find that some disciple is getting fixed in his faith in some deity or a god or a guru or someone, then I fix his faith there. I help him get anchored to that guru, because that is important. You see, to develop that personal bond with that incarnation or guru or goddess or god or goddess or whatever it is. So it's important that the person gets anchored to that, and then I start working through that guru or that entity, because actually ultimately it is me, Lord Krishna says, who is working irrespective of where the faith of this disciple has been fixed. So that is what Sri Aurobindo also replied Dilip Kumar Roy, that the spiritual capacity of the guru is not important. The guru, of course, should be sincere and genuine in his aspiration, but then his level of realization is not very important, because ultimately it is not the guru who is working, it is the force of the divine that is working through the guru. Another reflection that came to me while Mankul was speaking was that of a person who was against the use of drugs, refused antibiotics, and eventually after about 2 weeks he was forced to accept them. Another similar example is that of George Bernard Shaw. He was a great writer and a staunch vegetarian. But then he got once pernicious anemia. Pernicious anemia is because of vitamin B12 deficiency, but everybody who has vitamin B12 deficiency doesn't necessarily quickly go into pernicious anemia. So don't be too scared, because vitamin B12 deficiency is getting more and more common these days. But of course that should be treated. But anyway, this person, George Bernard Shaw, got pernicious anemia. And the only treatment for pernicious anemia available those days was not these vitamin B12 supplements which you get in a fancy form and maybe synthesized in a chemical lab, acting like vitamin B12. Those type of fancy things were not available. The only treatment available was liver therapy. Because liver has a lot of vitamin B12, so a product was prepared from animal livers for the treatment. And George Bernard Shaw was compelled to accept this treatment for his pernicious anemia, and that helped him live for another 10 years after accepting this therapy. So sometimes, when we go through these humbling experience, I'm not trying to say that being a vegetarian is not good or something like that. I'm not trying to say that because the person who goes vegetarian can have many reasons, and one of them is quite often the ethical reason that I do not want pain to be inflicted on any animal for the sake of my palate. When my nutritional needs can be quite well met from vegetable food, plant foods, then why should I consume an animal which feels the pain? Because we can relate easily to the pain of an animal, not so well to the pain felt by a plant, if at all. So we can't relate to that, so we don't want the pain to be inflicted on the animal. But then, again, sometimes the spirit behind the food is equally important. The thought behind consuming vegetarian foods is good, but if a person is, for any reason, as in case of George Bernard Shaw, being compelled to consume an animal product, then perhaps one can take it in the spirit of Khalil Gibran. He has said somewhere that when I kill an animal for food, I should remember that I'm doing it out of a certain necessity because of the way the world has been constituted. Life thrives on life, and just as my hand smites this animal, I am aware of that unseen hand which will smite me one day. So, it is that of a submission and seeing that higher force to which we are all subject that he said one can consume a non-vegetarian diet. So, but all the same, instead of going into that nicety, if one can just consume only plant products, plants as food, which is both more comforting because we feel we are not inflicting any pain on the animal, and also better for our health, as medical experts now say, and also better for ecological reasons, which is becoming a very important reason. We don't give enough importance to ecology for two reasons. Because, although we believe in rebirth, we have a tendency to feel that this life is all that is. So, in this life, probably I can sustain the same type of lifestyle as I've always had, including non-vegetarian food if it is there. So, after I'm dead, how does it matter? Huh? मेरा तो काम चल जाएगा इस ज़िंदगी में जैसे चल रहा है. The second reason why we don't give it as much importance as it deserves is because we feel that everybody is doing all these things which are spoiling the environment, depleting it, degrading it, polluting it. मेरे एक आदमी के ये करने से क्या फ़र्क पड़ेगा? If I consume water in a plastic bottle, if I waste a plastic bottle just for getting quarter liter of water, what does it matter? There are millions of bottles being sold like that. एक bottle मेरी extra हो जाएगी तो क्या फ़र्क पड़ेगा? So that little bit doesn't matter. So for these reasons, we don't give it enough importance. We give much greater importance to all the inequality, injustice, and cruelty prevailing in the world than to this. Of course, all these problems are basically the manifestations of one basic problem, the average level of human consciousness. But all the same, we give varying degrees of attention to all these manifestations of that low consciousness, and environmental depletion, degradation is something to which we do not give enough attention because of these reasons, whereas that is the one problem which threatens not only the existence of human beings as a species, but threatens also the continuation of life on this planet. So anyway, so enough of that. And why is it such an important ecological, what are the important ecological reasons why animal food should not be consumed? Firstly, the animals, getting food from animals is a very expensive process. As much as 30 kilos of plant proteins may be consumed by an animal before we get 1 kilo of protein from it. So if we did not raise animals, breed animals, as is done in countries which have a very high consumption of non-vegetarian food, if we do not use all that land to graze these animals, then all that land could be spared and we could grow on it human food which will wipe out the problem of hunger from the world in one stroke. Secondly, the gases which these animals produce, because a large number of animals is being bred specifically with this purpose. It's not that they just happen to be there. So if the gases that these animals produce, like methane, etc., they contribute to global warming. On top of that, all the factories which are converting them into meat, then all the freezers in which this meat is being stored, all the vehicles that are transporting this meat from one place to the other, all this is consuming a lot of energy and leaving carbon footprints. And a UN report in 2006 estimated that the contribution of the meat industry to global warming exceeds that of all the SUVs, ships and aeroplanes of the world put together. It is that important. And therefore, if the world were to go vegetarian, we'll be able to solve the problem of global warming with one stroke. But why is this not being talked about so much in so many conferences on ecology? Because there's a very strong meat lobby, particularly in the United States. That's why it is not talked about. Anyway, so that was a digression from that person needing antibiotics to George Bernard Shaw needing liver therapy, and from there to vegetarian diets. Now the kala, time. Who better can understand the importance of time than a doctor? Dr. Mankul Goyal is a dermatologist, so he knows that if there is a burn on the skin can regenerate, but it will take about 2 weeks for it to become really completely normal skin. Whereas an orthopedic surgeon knows that if there's a fracture in the bone, it will take 3 months to become whole. And also that orthopedic surgeon knows if the injury is to a muscle or a tendon, particularly a tendon, it may not heal completely ever. The pain may keep coming back again and again throughout the rest of the person's life because the tendons have very poor blood supply and they never heal really completely. The continuity may be restored, but it is with connective tissue, not with the original type of tissue, and therefore it always remains vulnerable to another injury anytime in the future. So it will never heal completely. So all these things are known. So time is important for not only healing of different parts of the body, but also for the spiritual progress. And one can look upon time as a friend. And while time should give us patience, it should also give us that strong will. That vertical concept of time is again important, that if when it happens, it may happen miraculously. That confidence, yes, is good, but then what is more important in practice is the patience, and for that one has to enjoy the process of yoga. And it is truly enjoyable. It's a journey which is long. It is not easy, but it is an enjoyable journey. The journey of yoga is enjoyable, and if we truly enjoy it, we'll say that, Mother, I'm ready to go on working for you for another 1,000 lives. I'm not in a hurry. So with that, we'll stop. And of course, Sri Aurobindo has given us the assurance that if we use all these 4 aids, the success on this path is assured.